Mail theft isn't some harmless nuisance, it's a federal crime. I found that out firsthand when a neighborhood enforcer decided my mailbox was his personal evidence bin. What he didn't realize was that a real postal investigator had already started tracking every move he made. Before I dig in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story spreads. It began when letters started disappearing from my mailbox. Not junk flyers either. Real stuff. Utility bills, official paperwork, a small parcel from my sister, even a birthday card from my mom with cash tucked inside. At first, I brushed it off as a delivery glitch, but after 3 straight weeks of missing mail, I knew something wasn't right. The pattern that tipped me off was the timing. Every single time something vanished, the self-proclaimed neighborhood patrolman was lurking nearby. He wore a black vest with bold white letters across the front, strutting around like an authority figure. I'd catch him hovering by driveways, rattling doorknobs, and too often lingering at my mailbox. One afternoon, I finally called him out. "Lose something?" he asked, smirking as I stared into my empty box where a package should have been. "Yeah, half my deliveries," I snapped back. He just lifted his hands to his belt like some discount cop. "Maybe the post office just doesn't like you," he said, dripping sarcasm. That line sealed it for me. I was sure he was the culprit. Thing is, under federal law, 18 U.S. Code 1708, stealing mail can land you up to 5 years in prison. And I wasn't about to let a fake tough guy toy with my life. I tried catching him on my own. I'd wait behind the curtains, phone camera ready, but he was slippery. He'd stroll past, glance around, and only move when no one was watching. My recordings never caught him red-handed. That's when I realized I needed heavier backup. Not the neighborhood association. They were useless, always covering for their so-called officer. Instead of turning to the useless HOA board, I went straight to the Federal Postal Security Division, the oldest law enforcement arm tied to the mail. Their agents handle everything from forged postage to identity theft. When I dropped a folder of my missing mail complaints on the desk and laid out my suspicions, one of the investigators leaned forward and asked me a single question. "Do you want to run a sting?" My pulse kicked. "You mean bait him?" The investigator gave a thin smile. "Exactly. But done properly, with evidence admissible in federal court. If he's been stealing, we'll nail him." That night, I barely slept. Part of me was anxious. What if the neighborhood enforcer figured out I'd gone over his head? But another part of me burned with anticipation. This wasn't just about vanished envelopes anymore. It was about proving that no one, not even a self-appointed badge wearer, could stand above the law. The trap was about to be set. The next call came fast. "We're going to plant a package," the investigator explained. "It'll look like ordinary mail, but it's tagged. If your so-called security guy touches it, we'll have him on federal charges." Hearing that sent a surge through me. At last, someone with real authority was treating this seriously. Inspector Rivera walked me through the plan. This wasn't some backyard sting. It was a controlled delivery. His team prepared a plain padded envelope, slipped a GPS tracker and tamper sensor inside, and coordinated a drop with a postal carrier on a precise route and schedule. It would appear like any other piece of mail. The instant anyone broke the chain of custody, an electronic record would be generated for court. I was never asked to handle the envelope myself. Rivera managed the logistics and legal protocols for evidence cars. On the morning of the delivery, I had every camera running. I'd added new angles on the driveway and the mailbox, cloud backups pulsing like a second heartbeat. The plan was simple: a normal-looking envelope, a routine delivery, and a watchful eye. If the neighborhood cop so much as touched it, the GPS would track him. If he walked off with it, the tamper alert would trip. Either way, it wouldn't be his word against mine. At 7:42 a.m., the mail truck rolled by, and the carrier slid the envelope into my box. 10 minutes later, my motion alert chimed. Movement at the curb. There he was. Same swagger, same stance I'd seen before. Vest zipped tight, badge lanyard clattering. He stopped at my mailbox, gave a quick look up and down the street. They then slid the padded envelope into his bag like it was junk mail. On Rivera's laptop, the tracker pinged. Pickup logged at 7:52 a.m. Vehicle moving east. Rivera kept his voice calm as he coordinated with local police, but there was no need to rush. The GPS trail showed the suspect pulling into a cul-de-sac, then walking into a house with the package still in hand. Agents shadowed him from a safe distance, relaying every move over the radio. When the guy tore the flap open on his porch, the tamper sensor flared. Breach confirmed. Rivera gave the signal. Local units swept in. He scrambled with excuses. Welfare check. Wrong address. I was just making sure it got delivered. But under the harsh glow of cruiser lights, his props looked pitiful. The laminated card clipped to his vest was cheap, the ID inside no better than a photocopy. Officers read him his rights. In his vehicle, they uncovered spiral notebooks, columns of addresses, notes on delivery times, scribbled marks like high-value pickups. In the trunk, stacks of envelopes identical to the decoy sat bundled together. Rivera cataloged the evidence with steady precision. Violation of federal mail statute, unlawful possession of mail, and conspiracy, he explained. The notebooks tied him to a larger pattern. The GPS data and tamper logs gave prosecutors an airtight chain of custody. Even the local cops were shocked. This wasn't some porch pirate snagging random boxes. It was a mapped-out operation. Neighbors, stirred by flashing lights, trickled outside in slippers and robes, phones recording. The HOA officer's swagger collapsed into the nervous mutter of a man cornered under a dozen spotlights. The inspection team wasted no time. Subpoenas for the notebooks, calls to other possible victims. Forensics queued up for his phone. Rivera leaned toward me and murmured, "If this branches wider, we'll find out. We've already got probable cause." By nightfall, the suspect sat in federal custody, the first round of subpoenas already in motion. The plain envelope had done its job, transforming weeks of suspicious vanishings into a full-scale criminal probe backed by hard data. And just when I thought the chapter was closed, the fallout began. At the very next neighborhood meeting, whispers turned into open mutters. People weren't whispering about lost envelopes anymore. They were whispering about indictments. Once word spread that our community security officer had been arrested by federal mail agents, the block came alive with shock. Parents clutched their boxes like lifelines. Nobody brushed it off this time. The inspectors confirmed it. He'd been charged under the federal mail statute, theft of U.S. mail. A crime carrying up to 5 years in prison, plus steep fines. Because the notebooks in his truck connected him to dozens of addresses, prosecutors tacked on conspiracy and obstruction counts. Overnight, it stopped being a petty theft story and became a full-blown federal case. Neighbors began to see just how deep the scheme went. A couple down the street admitted their bank statements had vanished. Another family lost an insurance check. This enforcer hadn't singled me out. He'd been quietly milking the whole neighborhood under a mask of authority. When the association board tried to spin it, the investigators released evidence. Text messages linking him directly to Tamara Greaves, our HOA president. She'd been feeding him addresses to monitor, dressing it up as dues enforcement. At first, Tamara flatly denied everything. But when the subpoenaed texts were read aloud in a hearing, her face drained of color. She hadn't merely allowed it, she directed it. Federal law offered her no escape hatch. Mail theft is strict liability. You can't plead, "I was just doing my job," or "I didn't know." The moment an item lands in a mailbox, it's federal property. Under 18 U.S.C. Part 2, aiding and abetting carries the same penalty as committing the act yourself. Tamara was named as a co-conspirator. The HOA scrambled to wash its hands. Within a week, an emergency vote was called. Tamara was stripped of her presidency by unanimous decision, her name scrubbed from every ledger and bulletin. Homeowners launched a civil suit against her personally, citing fraud, abuse of power, and emotional distress. The county clerk confirmed she also faced state charges for impersonation and harassment stacked on top of the federal counts. Meanwhile, the so-called security officer sat in federal custody, bail denied under the weight of evidence. Rivera told me quietly, he's not seeing daylight anytime soon. The feds want to set an example. Neighbors who once cowered under HOA fines began speaking openly. Stories of bogus citations, inspection fees, and intimidation tumbled out. What started as one man stealing letters had blown the entire racket apart. Within a month, the HOA's lawyers resigned, citing conflicts of interest. By the end of the quarter, the association itself was under state investigation for corruption and fraud. As for me, I no longer obsessed over my missing bills. What mattered was the look on Tamara's face when the badge she'd wielded like a weapon turned to dust in her hands. No amount of HOA posturing could stand against federal law. One crisp morning, I stepped out to check my mailbox. For the first time in months, there was no dread. Just the soft click of the hinge and the rustle of envelopes that belonged to me, and only me. That's when it hit me. They thought they ruled this neighborhood with phony rules and intimidation. But in the end, one sting had been enough to remind them, you don't mess with the feds.